I'm here with Thomas today, and we're going to be ranking types in Draft League based on how necessary they are. And we're going to start off with the bug type straight away. And as much as it pains me to say, because bug type is my favorite, I think neither of us will really go against it going into not needed. Right?
Yeah, it's one of those where, like, if you pick up a bug type, you never pick up the bug type because it's a bug type. You pick it up because it's the it's the secondary type of something else most often.
Yeah, so if you're picking up a scissor, you're picking it up because it's a steel type, not because it's a bug type. It has the niche of resisting ground, but outside of that, you're not really picking up a bug type because you want to have a ground resist or anything like that. So bug is going to go into not needed, and there's probably not many people who are going to disagree with us. So next up, we're going to go into the dark type, and I actually have dark type probably as a must-have. And the reason I say that is because I think psychic types that can run like mono stored power are insanely scary in draft, especially because usually they would get like something to boost their like defense and their special defense. So I personally never go into a draft like thinking I don't need a dark type, but whenever I look at a draft when I'm building, I definitely look to see if they have a dark type. So dark type for me is in must have, but I do want to know what you think.
So I think it's probably one of those that teeters between must have and should have for me, because I do believe if you have a strong enough steel / your own psychic type, you can beat the other psychic type, especially if they have access to like haze or phasing in any capacity. You can kind of get around the whole not being able to be immune to like stored power core mindsets. But I do also think dark types just provide so much, both as you said against the psychic type, but also you get the stab knockoff. Knockoff is of course one of the best moves in the game. It's just like really nice. So I would probably have it in must-have, but I don't think it's like my number one of like all the typings.
Yeah, I mean, because there were so many good dark types introduced in this generation, and we saw how powerful they were, and like just how much people valued getting a strong dark type. Now, there is obviously the case for it to be a should-have instead of a must-have, because a draft might function without a dark type, but again, this is like obviously a tier list is going to be biased, so you guys make sure to let us know what you think. But I would personally never go into a draft without a dark type, and that's just the way that I play Draft League. But we could put it in should have and then potentially move it up, or we can have it in must have and potentially move it down.
Yeah, I would probably rather have it in must have, and then if we figure out that we have too many, I would rather move it down, because I do think it's more important to have one than to not have one. Like I do also actively, like basically it's, do you actively search out getting a dark type? And I definitely do that, always.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, me too. I always look to have a dark type. So we'll leave it there for now, and then we might revisit it if necessary. Now, dragon type is actually something I want to hear your opinion on.
Yeah, so can I start out on this? Can I start on this?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
I have now had multiple drafts. I think it's like 2 of them that has not have a dragon type on them, and both have performed very well. So I'm actually leaning to the good to have, because I think the typing defensively is very nice because you resist a lot of the common types and water, fire, electric, grass, and all that. But I actually don't think it's that needed if you can resist those typings and you have other good checks to different stuff that dragon normally would be good for. Because what you often get in a dragon type isn't necessarily because they're a dragon type, it's because dragon type Pokemon just tends to be strong. Like it's pseudo legendaries. Yeah, they just tend to be strong. It's pseudo legendaries and whatnot.
I was going to say should have, but good to have is definitely a fair argument, especially because of how much people prioritize fairy types. That like often a dragon type is not only running dragon stab, like it needs another move to be able to like make it strong. So like Garchomp, it's good because it's a dragon type, but also the ground typing makes it like super strong. So I could see dragon in good to have. I usually like to have like a one because of the defensive like capabilities of it.
Yeah.
But offensively, I agree that like they aren't should to have. So I would probably have it in good to have as well.
Yeah, because I think it comes down to ultimately most of the dragon types we take like early on and whatnot. We take them also just because they're very strong. Right?
Yeah, I mean, if I was doing this tier list on my own, I might have put it should have, but I'm down to leave it in good to have for now, and then obviously revisit it if.
Yeah, I just think my own experience now that I've had several drafts without a dragon type, I would have it in good to have, because I actually think you can get around not having it.
Probably. I've never tried it, but I'll take your word for it. Now, electric types is something I am super low on.
Oh, see that's where we're opposite, because I'm like decently high on electric types, where I would never go to must have, because you can definitely get around not having it, but I think it should be in should have personally.
I was going to say that for me personally, I think electric types are like not needed. That's where I would put it, because I just don't ever like look at a draft and be like, oh, this team doesn't have an electric type, then it's not going to be able, because I just feel like there's other ways of beating the fat water types that you want to beat, or that of getting momentum. Like, I just feel like you have other ways of doing it, and the only thing that electric types realistically provide that I can see of some value is being a flying resist. But a lot of the electric types aren't even that bulky, so they're not like proper flying resist. So I would put it in not needed. If you want to put it in should have, then maybe we can meet midway and just have it in good to have.
I mean, I can agree to that. So the whole argument about like you need an electric type to beat water types, I think more so stems for a lot of people see the grass typing as the defensive check to water types. So they want their electric type to be the offensive check. They want the electric type to come in, be able to one-shot most water types if they need to. And as you said, I also think having the flying resist is really, really nice. I know there's a lot of them that are not that bulky, but there's a couple like Electros and whatnot that are like a really good bulky mon.
Yeah.
I can agree to good to have, because I do see the argument that realistically you don't really need it. I just always feel more comfortable with an electric type on team.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. Like, obviously, one of the reasons I wanted to have you here with me is because I know that you value other things that I don't value as much, so it will lead to an interesting discussion. You guys in the comments, make sure to let us know what you think, but obviously, electric types only have one weakness in ground, right? Which is awesome, but then they only have, like, 2 resists, so they're not the best defensive typing. Offensively, they can be very good, but just personally, when I look at a draft, I'm never, like... I'm just not too high on electric types, so we can leave it in good to have for now. All right. Well, fairy is probably one that it's going to be like pretty consensual. It's probably going to be a must-have.
It probably needs. Like, I think in this gen specifically, it's almost like, even though the fairies are much more scarce than they used to be, I think with how good dark types, dragon types, and fighting types are in this generation, having the fairy that is good against all of them is just like very needed.
Yeah. Yeah, I think defensively, a draft needs a fairy type 100%. And I think offensively, a fairy type is very, very good. Like in this season of the P4G, I had Carbink, and the amount of matchups where I was looking like, oh man, if I had an offensive fairy in this matchup, I would go crazy. So I think fairy types offensively are super solid as well, especially if you can pair them with like some other decent coverage option. Like some of them get Mystical Fire or Aura Sphere or whatever.
I was say an offensive fairy, if it has coverage for steel types, is very good. If it has no coverage for steel types, it immediately falters, I feel like.
It's a little bit, yeah. And then Carbink does because it gets Earth Power, but it has base 50 special attack.
Yeah, I mean, it's a Carbink, like, come on.
Yeah, I mean, it has Body Press, but like, sometimes it just doesn't work. Yeah, but I don't know. I think fairy types are definitely sort of like S tier, might be the best type in the game. Once we get like a fairy and like ground type, it might be over. Yeah. But fairy types are definitely top tier.
100%.
And I don't think many people would disagree with that, really. Now, fighting types. So fighting type is actually, it probably is my second favorite type, and my love for it makes me want to put it in should have.
So I think here I think it's interesting, right? Because you really have to look at this as is it the typing or is it the mon that you're going for with fighting types? Because like I'm thinking there's so many good fighting types right now, but like am I going for Iron Valiant because it is specifically a fighting type? Probably not.
Probably not.
Same with Great Tusk. Am I going for Great Tusk because he's specifically a fighting type? Probably not. I'm doing because he's the greatest spinner in the game. He's defensive. He's offensive.
Yeah.
It's like
obviously the typings, like this is all very nuanced. Like some fighting types are good because they have other tools that other fighting types don't have, and obviously like that will make the discussion a whole lot complicated. But we're just here just ranking it purely on typing, and I think every draft usually does end up with a fighting type, but obviously your point is valid of like, do they have that fighting type because it's a fighting type, or do they have it because that fighting types offers different things, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know. I'm definitely in between good to have and should have. I kind of lean more a little towards should have because I value it more than an electric type.
So I would say like this. I think it should have because even though it's based on the mons, most fighting type has good coverage as well. Like there's the elemental punches. Yeah. Often they get knockoff. Often they get like other moves. It's like as a
usually get Earthquake, your Stone Edge.
As a general, fighting types do have a good coverage, which makes them better. So I think that should still count for them because it's more than just half of them has that, I would say.
Not to mention, like, priority is a pretty good thing in draft league. You know, like stab, mock punch is pretty good. Close combat is just a very strong move without a major drawback, really. So yeah, we'll have fighting type and should have for sure. Now, fire type is also, well, I'm a little bit higher on fire types now than I was before. I would probably slot it into good to have.
So
because I think defensively it's nice to resist fire. And usually I do pick up a fire type, but it's always like, let me see what cheap fire type I can find, and never like, oh, I need to pick up a high tier fire type because they're super good.
So I'm probably on the it's not needed side, just because I feel like fire types are very strong. Like of course, being able to run like specs, eruption on a few of them, overheat is very strong and whatnot. It's nice. But it's like, I'm never actively being like, okay, I need to pick up a fire type. I need to pick up a fire type. It's always like a second thought that I have at the end of the draft. It's like, okay, should we see if we can squeeze in a fire type here and there? Like, I would 100%. I think Dragon, with its defensive capabilities, is just straight up better. I think Electric, for me, is better just because I think the resist to flying specifically is like more important than fire's resist. Like, fire being able to resist fairies is nice. But how many fire types are you actively using as your fairy resist, right?
Yeah, there's not much. And then another thing that I don't like is that you're almost always pigeonholed to running boots on a fire type if you want to use it in any defensive capacity. If Will-O-Wisp was 100% accurate on fire types, maybe that would mean something. But I mean, some people do value having like a Will-O-Wisp immunity. You know what? I'm down to leave it on not needed. I know a lot of people will probably be a little bit upset at this. It's not that fire types aren't good in draft, but are they needed for a draft? I don't think so. Maybe I would have it in good to have, but I'm down to have it in not needed, and just hear what people have to say about it, because some people are definitely very, very high on fire types. That's just not. I'm not super high on fire types. Like I said, when I grab a fire type, it's always like, what 5 or 6 point fire type can I find? And I usually end up with like a Mac Border or a Typhlosion, right?
Now, this next typing and flying, I think is one of the most difficult ones to rank, because almost any team has a flying type, but almost no team has it because it's a flying type. Because flying is the secondary type on almost any mon that's not like named Tornadus, right?
Yeah, exactly. But I would argue that so flying types are super important just for the reason that they are ground immunity. And like, we'll get to ground in a second, but like ground is one of like the most like it's a very good offensive type, right? So I feel like most people look to have a flying type. That could be sort of mitigated if you have like levitate users. Obviously, they sort of serve the same purpose as a flying type. Flying type is also a very, very good offensive typing, but it does usually require additional coverage to be fully effective. So also
one thing, I don't know why they've done this with flying types. I don't know if it's like it's a kink they have a Game Freak or something, but what flying move is just good with no drawback whatsoever?
Not many. Like even stuff like dual wing beat can miss, which is just insane.
That's the thing. Like Brave Bird gives you recall, Hurricane and Bleak Wind and Air Slash can all miss for whatever reason. Drill Pick. I think Drill Pick is the only one, and it's
even that
80.
move is kind of garbage. It's been power crept because it's like base 80 power. Like
exactly.
It needs to be a little bit stronger.
I think if flying types had more reliable good moves, like Brave Bird, I would say is reliable. Like the recall is annoying, but it's kind of reliable. But it's just more than just Brave Bird, I would probably have them in must have. But because you have that drawback on pretty much any move you click, I don't think I can put them personally over should have.
Yeah, you might be right. Like, because like I said, they're usually picked up to be a ground immunity, but if you can pick up a couple of levitators and like have decent ground resist, you should be mostly fine. Most teams will end up with a flying type, but that's just because of what their secondary typing.
Like don't get me wrong, you can pick like a Zapdos because it's partially a flying type. Like that probably does come into your mind, but it's not like.
I mean, it's a good defensive typing, right? But again, I feel like it might have the problem of being pigeonholed to boots a little bit, with it not being able to run like leftovers or whatever it is. So like, I mean, the top tier flying types are top tier, but I feel like there will be a big drop off between the top tier and like the rest of it.
Yeah, really, I think that's where it kind of is. Like we're talking like Tornadus, Zapdos, Enamorus. Like Enamorus is a flying type, but doesn't use the flying typing like almost at all.
Again, most teams will end up with one because it's a good fighting resist, it's a ground immunity and stuff like that. But I don't think it's solely because of the flying type that people are picking it up realistically. So
yeah, I would agree.
We'll leave it there and should have, and and we'll see. So Ghost type is actually a type that I think Ghost might be one of the best offensive typings. Maybe not so much this gen, but last gen Ghost types were 100% like the best offensive typing in my opinion in Draft League.
Yeah.
They're good to have from a defensive standpoint because of the immunities it provides and obviously the possibility of spin blocking. But I don't think it should have. I would always put it in like good to have because I think it's like a luxury type thing.
Yeah. So before I give my opinion real quick, I will say I think a little opposite of you. I actually think Ghost types are way stronger this gen than they were last gen. But we are not allowing like Spectre and even Dragapult is starting to get banned, which means we don't have the same top tier ghost types as we used to. But it's like with the amount of ghosts that are now, because like we got a couple of very good ghost types in Gen 9, like Goldenko, Skeledirge, Silverledge. I do think ghost typing is it's slightly stronger, but it also hindered a little bit because now dark types are also way better now. So it's like
that's what I was gonna say. So to clarify, I still think ghost types are really strong. Potentially as strong as they were last gen, but I think the rise of dark types in this generation made Ghost a little bit less viable offensively and defensively because obviously dark resists Ghost, and then from the offensive standpoint, Ghost and Dark basically hit the same thing more or less.
I mean, they do like this. It's mostly the resist, like where Fairy resists Dark, but it doesn't resist Ghost. That's like
exactly So like Ghost types are still super strong, but I think the rise of Dark types made Ghosts a little bit weaker. So I think it's a good to have because I see the good to have as like a luxury tier. And that's definitely where I would put Ghost types.
I would probably agree with the good to have just because again, there's a lot of times where I won't necessarily actively search out the Ghost typing, but I'm still like looking for the specifically, if I'm making a plan where I plan to hazard stack, I will actively search out the ghost typing to try and get the spin blocking.
Yeah, even the whole like spin blocking can be very dubious in some matchups because a lot of the rapid spinners, or a lot of the ghost types, first of all, aren't that bulky, and then a lot of the rapid spinners, like the Donphan family, like they get ground coverage or they get knockoff or whatever it is. So depending on what your ghost type is, it might not always be easy to spin block. So I think good to have is sort of like the perfect tier for it, really. Grass types. I like grass types.
I'm so 50-50 on grass type because it's like
I would say
it has so many weaknesses, but it's also so good because of water.
It does, yeah. But the I don't know. I always look to have a grass type just because of the ground resists, but it's kind of like the fire type being in the way that like sometimes my grass type is just like a cheap one that I found like in the lower tiers because it's not something that I super prioritize. But I think a draft can function without one. But your ground meekness might become a little bit harder to manage at that point, and depending on the ground type you have.
Ultimately, I think what makes a grass type good or bad, and like there's not a whole lot in the middle, is the ability. Like look at Rillaboom, right?
Yeah,
he is amazing with grassy surge, and that is partially due to him also being a grass type because you get those extra boosted grass moves. So I think the grass typing is nice because it resists certain types that you really want to resist, like as you mentioned, ground,
like
but
water,
also
ground,
water.
Yeah.
But it also has so many weaknesses.
Yeah, it can be so good defensively and so bad as well.
Yeah.
Like obviously, it being weak to U-turn is super.
That was my next thing. Is if whatever you're trying to check has U-turn, it's over. There's not much you can do.
Yeah, it's hard to. But I think a good grass type is good. And I think even like the lower tier grass types can work on a draft. So
yeah,
I would probably put it as good to have. I definitely value it more than a fire type and a bug type.
I would, because like I think every single draft I pick up, I do have a grass type, but as you said, it's not in the top like 5 to 6 months. It's towards the bottom.
Definitely, definitely not. I think ground types is another one of those types where I would just put it in must-have, and I don't think much people would have much to say about it.
Immunity in and of itself is very nice. Like I know Ghost has 2 immunities, but the one immunity doesn't really matter in normal. And like fighting, even though Ghost is immune to fighting, often I would actually use the fairy type as the check round.
Most likely, yeah. Again, because most fighting types would end up having like coverage for it. But I think it's very valuable to not be volt switched on every single time an electric type comes in. And then I think ground offensively is such a strong
ground probably also has like the best offensive move in the game, I think.
Yeah.
Like just base 100, like Earthquake just base 100. Like even Earth Power, like they have one of each side that is just incredibly strong. Zero drawbacks. Like it's
exactly, yeah. And then most ground types usually end up having stuff like Stone Edge, so you can hit the flying type. So I think like an offensive ground type, it's hard to point at an offensive ground type and say that it's bad. And even like defensive ones. Like there's super cheap ground types that always get picked because they just get the job done. And I think that every single draft should prioritize having a decent ground type on it. And then ice, probably going to go down to not needed.
Ice is so interesting, right? Because there's multiple mons that are ice type that are very good. Like Chin Pao, which is now like pretty much banned everywhere. Amazing mod. And that is partially due to being ice, like because ice is good offensively.
Offensively, yeah.
But you do need the secondary type to truly make it good. Like ice by itself is rarely good.
Yeah, especially because water types are so prominent in Draft League. So like if you're a pure ice type, okay, you could get freeze dry, and some of them do get freeze dry. But if you look at Pokemon like Weavile and then like Mamoswine, like they're good because their secondary stab can smack the water types hard that would want to switch into the ice type. So offensively, it's a good type. Defensively, it's probably the worst type in the game.
Oh, it's not probably. It's by like a mile.
Normal types.
I think that's a good to have because it's like.
I'd agree.
There's not, as we talked about, there's maybe not as many ghosts, like high tier ghosts, like Spectre and Dragapult running around. But if they are in the draft, or if someone picks up like a Gengar, or someone picks up Ceruledge, you kind of do want the normal type just so you can kind of prevent it from just going rampant. Because realistically, your dark type is often not going to be enough of a...
Yeah, depending on which dark you have, you might not want it switching into ghost type.
Exactly.
Attacks, right?
So the normal type becomes good in that sense. And not only having one weakness, if it's like a fat normal, that can be very good to have.
Yeah, so Pokemon like Snorlax and now like Ursaring that can run Eviolite is pretty strong, but it's hard for me to think of like top tier normal types. Like I can think of Ursaluna, I can think of
Blood Moon as well.
Snorlax, yeah, obviously both Ursalunas, but then after that, like I just like Porygon's fallen off a cliff this gen.
I mean, the Dunsparce isn't top tier, but
I guess the Dunsparce is good.
I think it's one of the best mid tier picks you can probably get.
Yeah, probably, especially if you can Terra it, but like. Even on its own, Dunsparce is a pretty good Pokemon in general. I think last gen normal types were much more needed. I drafted regular Porygon, like the baby one, so many times last gen because with Teleport and Eviolite, it was just strong.
Yeah, like, but that's also, it was set up because it was a normal type, or that's because it was a fat mon that got Teleport?
It's because like Ghost types last gen were also super strong. With like Spectrier was super strong, Dragapult was strong, and those Pokemon were usually allowed. So I would think normal is like good to have.
I would agree.
Depending on your team constitution, you might not even need one, so it's not super important. Poison types. I would probably value this.
No, I think I have this in must-have, if I'm being honest, because it's like, I think poison has become so important, both because of like T-Spike's absorption, but also you need something that can kill a fairy type. Like you just need something that can kill a fairy type.
Yeah.
And poisons are more often, I feel like, good at killing fairy types than like steel types are, in my opinion.
Yeah, usually steel types would be a bit more defensive in theory. I don't know, I have a bit of a hot take, which I think is toxic spikes are a little bit overrated.
Just because everybody
just prioritize having a grounded poison type so that when you do have toxic spikes, like most of the time you don't even end up bringing it because they could just so if somebody doesn't have it, then it's good, but then again you can run like boots and stuff like that.
You can also think it like this: if you see someone, like if you're battling someone and you see they don't have a poison type, doesn't toxic spike spring into your mind immediately?
It does, 100% it does, but then the other person, sure, it will force them to build in a certain way, but they also have like ways around it. So like stuff that's off the ground.
I'm not saying T-Spikes is the end-all be-all, but I'm just saying like that is kind of what the poison typing does, is it trains your brain to be like, okay, do they have the poison type? If they don't, okay, can I make T-Spikes work? If they do, all right, we move on.
Yeah, I mean, I'm saying all this, and I still, whenever I'm drafting, always look to have a poison type, so... And especially because of how good fairy types are, I feel like a poison type is good because of it being a fairy resist, because there's not too many of those. And then it has the added benefit of T-Spikes and whatnot. So I was saying all that, but I still always look to have a poison type in my drafts, and it's not even close. So I'm down to have it in must-have, because I do think it's more important than these two. A psychic type. Psychic types, I would put them in should have.
Yeah, I think so too.
I know there's an argument for good to have.
So I think should have is fair, because it's one of those types, as we talked about when we did dark, that if your opponent doesn't have a specific typing against you being the dark type, psychic types can just kind of run rampant. If it has access to Calm Mind and Stalk Power, and they don't have a dark type, you can probably figure out a Calm Mind set in some situations.
Exactly. Yeah, and psychic types usually are Pokemon that have a lot of good coverage. They tend to be able to support your team well with like screens and stuff like that. And I think even offensively, they're pretty good. They're just a pretty good type. Like Psychic Spam is definitely real a lot of the times.
Psychic Spam
and
is
even
like
defensively, I think Psychic types offers like good resists in like the fighting type and opposite Psychic type. So
yeah, I would agree.
I think Should to Have is a pretty good spot, considering a lot of the Psychic types are like just good Pokemon in general as well.
100%.
Rock types will probably go into not needed.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because like there's a lot of rock types I like, but it's like I'm not that often picking them because they're necessarily rock types. I'm also picking because of what they have access to. Like Rock has access to Excel Rock, which is a rock type move, but it's also just nice because it's priority, you know?
Yeah, I mean, the only instance where I will look for a rock type is if I look at my draft and I'm like, oh my god, I'm super weak to flying types. I need something to resist it. And then I might pick up like a budget rock type, but it's only really in case of like I've massively fucked up.
Even then, I think there are situations where I would maybe rather look to getting a secondary electric type, even if I have one.
I'm not getting a primary electric type. How am I getting a secondary one?
For me, it's more so I think the electric typing is a better flying resist because a lot of flying types does have access to like focus blast or close combat. So having the electric type, which is not weak to anything, because like almost no flying type has ground coverage unless they are power ground type, right?
All right. Field types.
Yeah, it's probably a must-have. Like it's
must-have, right?
I mean, I don't remember ever really seeing a draft without a steel type, and if it has no steel type, I immediately go, I don't know about that one.
Yeah, no steel type. Just because steel is such a good defensive typing, because steel resists like so many different types, and like steel type Pokemon just tend to be good Pokemon as well. So I definitely always go for a steel type. Like there's not a single draft where I don't.
Yeah, and like there's even if you think about like steel's weaknesses, like 2 of them you can have immunities for. Like fighting, you can have a ghost immunity. Ground, you can have a flying immunity, so you can cover a steel type pretty well as well.
Yeah, and they're just super valuable, especially because fairy types are so good, right? And you would usually want a good fairy switch in and something that can threaten it offensively. So I would definitely say must have. Now, last but not least,
can I start with this because like I might have a slight hot take here.
This is why I was actually going to ask you to start with this, because you were drafting the other day and I looked at your team and I was like, why does your team not have a water type? And I guess you just don't value it.
I have learned through experience that water typing, like the typing, is not a must-have. It's a should-have, definitely, like because water types are generally very good. Because like they're even pretty good offensively if you have an offensive water type. But I've kind of learned that you do not need the defensive water type at all, which means you probably don't need the water type as a whole. Because you can have other mons that can kind of pigeonhole what having a bulky water means.
Yeah, I mean, I for one think water types are must-have, and I'll tell you what, I love one of the things that I've learned to really appreciate in Draft League is drafting 2 water types, one more defensive and one more offensive, and that's just something that I've been doing a lot over the last few Draft Leagues, and so I absolutely think that water is must-have. So I would not go into a draft.
Don't get me wrong, I do always pretty much draft a water type, but I've just learned. Because I had a draft where I've actually had I had one that by mistake didn't have a bulky water because I got sniped on like all of them, so I just ended up with I think no I had Basculin and Iron Bundle. It was actually the PPL Flare team. I had 2 water types, but neither of them were like the bulky water. They were just they were just offensive. That's
definitely a fair and a very interesting take on it. But I'm gonna make the executive decision and put it into must-have. But I am very interested to hear what other people say, to see if I'm alone in this of like valuing a water type that much, or if other people agree that like it's good to have, like you should probably have one, but if you don't have one, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's maybe more down to you don't need to have the bulky water type, but having a water type as a general is probably pretty good. But it doesn't have to be bulky. It can't just be an offensive one.
Yeah, that is fair. Well, looking at this tier list now, Thomas, is there anything that you think we should probably change? Like, they're not ordered inside their own tier, so don't pay too much attention to that. But is there any type that you would say we got slightly wrong?
No, I don't think there's anything we got wrong. There's maybe like a few changes I would make if I made it personal, but honestly, I don't think there's anything here I want to have a long discussion about, because it's not like I don't feel like super hard about the water type. I don't feel super hard about the electric type. Like, I understand the argument of like you don't really need the electric type, right?
Yeah, I mean, seeing fire there with the rest of those types is a little bit sad, but fire types, I kind of agree that fire types are just not you just don't really need a fire type.
Yeah, it's like what exactly are you drafting the fire type for? It's for killing steel types. Draft a better fucking fighting type. Like, I'm sorry.
You guys let us know down in the description below, not the description, the comment section, what you think about the tier list. I will leave a link to this same tier list in the description if you guys do want to go ahead and make a tier list of your own, and then tweet it at me. My Twitter is also in the description. But with that being said, thank you, Thomas, for being here and helping me put this together.
Someone had to tell you your opinion is wrong, so you know.